The first guest of the evening is truly a poet. He's an artist. He is a friend and an inspiration to anyone who I think who has ever played the guitar or tried to write poetry. Would you please welcome Gordon Lightfoot?
Steel Rail Blues. This is one that's not necessarily the best known of his works, but it's maybe the best story song that he had written up until that time. So what do you think, original or remake?
I really like the original on this one because I view it as a folk song. They did a solid job on Gord's Gold, and I would have predicted that Lightfoot would have made sure this one got re-recorded because he always kind of turned to this in concerts, and he loved to tell the story about why he wrote this song and all of that stuff. And so, that just comes out over and over. And you hear a little bit of that empathy that he has for the song in the Gord's Gold version. But when I listen to the two back to back, I just think it fits better in the original kind of classic acoustic sound, simpler. I just like it straight out. You said coffee house before. To me, that's what this is.
I get the same feeling from the original, but I do like the different touches that wound up in the re-recording. I like the fact that there's a sparse sort of lead guitar in this one. In the Gord's Gold version, I thought it absolutely worked perfectly. And I liked for the fact that some reason his voice sounds better on Gold for me than it did on the original.
I love your emulation. Just like Gord was a big fan of this song, you obviously are. So
yeah, I listened to it a lot driving up and down different roads. Wherefore and Why? Again, a re-recording from Did She Mention My Name? What do you think, Glenn?
Well, it's a wonderful song. There's even a unrecorded live version that John Denver did way back when, but it has such values in it. And I think there was no accident that on the CBC special that Gord kind of made that the theme of what that special was going to be. And I view it as a classic folk song again. And this one, I can't pick. I like both versions so well. It's kind of what you talked about. Think about the talent that Gord assembled for Gord's Gold. Amazing guitar players and pedal steel and, whatever you want on the menu, he could bring to that. And some of that shows up here, but I love both versions. I tend to, because I've watched that special so much and all of that, nostalgia might drive me a little bit towards the original, but I'd have a hard time picking.
And I have to admit, Wherefore and Why, some of my favorite lyrics, not one of my favorite arrangements, but I can tell you that when you had the strings and the orchestration, and you also have the country effect with the drums and the pedal steel, I thought you kind of got to choose your side. It felt like there was too much going on, too much fat in the gravy. So if I was going to listen to this song, I would take the original over the one on Gold. And honestly, if there is a weak link on album one, I think it's probably this song.
I agree. And I think eventually we'll talk about what could have been, but I think we basically concur on that one.
Bitter Green, which is one of my very favorite songs, and one of my son's favorite songs too. When he was a little boy, he loved listening to it. Wanted to know what you thought. I'm going to let you take the lead on this one. So, Back Here on Earth or Gord's Gold?
Boy, I tell you what, on this one, I think that the stronger vocal might be on the original. He tried to do something different. This is very similar to what you were talking about on a couple of the other tracks. I'm not sure that this song needed everything that they tried to bring to it on Gold, because if you listen to the vocal on Bitter Green, I listened to it 4 times over because I thought, wow, I never really thought about this before. He's using sound on sound. He's literally 3 Everly brothers singing together, and they're all Gord. It's Gord 1, Gord 2, Gord 3, and they're all there. And so he is Peter, Paul, and Mary, but it's all Gord. Then I go back and I listen to Bitter Green, and I love just the classical acoustic. What a folk song and what a story. So This one's probably not that close for me. I got to go with the original on this one. I'm going with Back Here on Earth.
Yeah, I agree with you. Back Here on Earth. I think that's the superior version. And in this case, I think that the attempt to have him harmonize on the chorus, the vocal chemistry didn't work that day. I thought the harmony came off as a little bit too dark, and I thought he would have done better if he had gotten another voice to sing with rather than trying to record himself during the three parts. It worked musically. There was nothing wrong with the way the harmonies came together on a sort of technical basis, but I didn't think the vocals had enough color on that particular piece of the song. I love the song. I've played the song in my own gigs, but I would rather listen to the original than this one.
I agree. And I think of all the ones maybe that where we've made a lot of close calls, there have been a lot of things that might have gone into overtime, but this is not one of them. I think the original is stronger.
And then we get to the last cut on album 1, and that's Early Morning Rain. And this one is one that is arguably his greatest song of all, and one that I think he could sing better than anybody else ever could. So, Glenn, are you going to take the original, or are you going to fast forward to the 1975 version?
This is my opinion. If you'd have asked me maybe even 5 years ago, I would have said the original, because I equated it with Peter, Paul, and Mary, and that the fact that he did it at that time. And so I put those two things together. But over time, listening to Gord's Gold version, I appreciate it more and more. I'd give Gord's Gold version like a 9.5, and I'd give the other one on the 66 album a 9. It's that close. But I would go with Gord's Gold version. I think that Lightfoot put everything that he had learned about singing, even the way he styled the song, it just works. So I would go with Gord's Gold on this one.
Yeah, me too. I'm kind of close on this because he hasn't done a bad version of this song in any recording that I've ever heard. I thought the fact that the remix had some horns in it, that was very tastefully done. I thought the pedal steel was just perfect on it. It didn't do too much, and it didn't overstay its welcome. And he ended the song theatrically, but not dramatically. So I would give that one, props for that. That song is actually in the playlist for my walk-in music for one of my classes, just because I think it's got more elements to it than the original did, and they were all arranged very well. I think the kids might like it a little better than if I just had the one with the acoustic guitar and nothing else on that playlist.
That's awesome. I go back to the anecdote on the 1979 soundstage concert when Gord introduces this song as his first real good song. And he explains to the audience that Peter, Paul, and Mary helped kickstart his career and all of that. I can just imagine by 1975, he had the same full appreciation to say, wow, I've got another shot at my first real good song. Let's see what we can do with it.
And it is a perennial, and everybody that is anybody, I think in terms of commerciality, everybody that's anybody has done this song. And I figure if Elvis did it among everybody else, it's got a certain amount of street cred. So I agree with you on that. And it did give him a chance to structure it in a way that he couldn't have structured, or that he probably wasn't thinking of when he originally released it back in '66. So, yeah, that's why I think the experience in that time, it really paid off.
And I'm trying to remember, Michael, a lot of that stuff on the 66 album, I believe, is recorded in 64 and 65. Think about that. You're talking about a decade later. And everything that he's learned, everything that he's done, his 70s style, the way he sings, the way he presents his songs, all of that's kind of incorporated into what we hear in this song.
Yeah, and that is done in an absolutely flawless manner. So I think he gets better with that. You're listening to Carefree Highway Revisited. We'll be right back after a word from a podcast partner or two.
Hey, Do you like classic albums? Technically, like the 20th century albums, such as like Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones. I've only had Beatle episodes so far. However, I'll be doing more. But welcome to my show, or rather, hey, welcome to check out my show. All those years ago, a classic album podcast with the dipping sauce. As you can see, the George Harrison reference. I review classic albums, not of those the likes of Beethoven, the likes of the Beatles and Rolling Stones, and like I mentioned earlier, or what have you. So yeah, check it out. It's every Monday. I do albums, conspiracies, songs, all that jazz. So just check it out. All those years ago, a classic album podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.
Did you know we have a full podcast series that walks through Bob Dylan's entire professional career? It's great for newer fans, or anyone who wants to take a thoughtful tour through the last 60 years of Dylan. It's called A Bob Dylan Primer, and it's a 16-part serial. Find it at fmpods.com or anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Which brings us to album 2. Now, we're not going to do a huge amount on any one of these songs because they are the originals. We will talk a little bit about the order in which they are set on the album, because I know you found that really intriguing. Before we dive into that too much, something I thought was interesting is the mix of singles and non-singles. I don't want to go into too much detail, but Cotton Jenny was not a single, Don Quixote was not a single, neither was Circle of Steel or Old Dan's Records or Cold on the Shoulder. The rest of them, Sundown, Beautiful, Summer Side of Life, Rainy Day People, If You Could Read My Mind, Carefree Highway, they were all released that as singles. So I think there was a certain calculation. But the idea was that you had to think about these were the title tracks to a lot of his records. So I think there may have been a little bit of psyching out of the audience saying, hey, you remember the title track to this album? Maybe you should go buy the whole album. So that was something that I found interesting. So what about the flow of the songs caught your ear on this?
Well, we know Lightfoot is such a wilderness guy, a nature guy, a seasonal guy, a Renaissance man that appreciates life in all of its beautiful forms. And I think that he goes from Minstrel of the Dawn. Okay, we're starting the day, and then he's going to end up with Sundown. Okay, and then you've got Summer Side of Life. Maybe the sun is shining brightly, and all of a sudden it's into Rainy Day People. I mean, just looking at what he picked there, of course, it shouldn't be surprising all that's available to him because that's what he writes from. He writes from life. It did it maybe better than anybody did in the folk arena. So I love even the order. So it goes from Minstrel of the Dawn to Sundown. And what's great is that Minstrel of the Dawn, if you say, what is the iconic title for, I call him Master Lightfoot, what's Minstrel of the Dawn? So you got to start with that, and then why not go with your biggest, only #1 Billboard hit of all time, and it just happens to fit. You go from dawn to sundown. And I also believe that he wanted to probably give some transition to where Minstrel of the Dawn is pretty close to a ballad. Sundown is country rock, basically.
Yes.
So I've always loved that about an artist where you don't want to get too much in a rut. And so, okay, let's liven it up a little bit. Let's bring the tempo up. And then, of course, Beautiful following Sundown, you go from the images of the sundown girl to maybe the classic beautiful girl that he's thinking of in that song. I mean, yeah, that's just great stuff. But I love the way he put it together. And I think about if I had been Lightfoot, what were you wanting to do, let's get at least the two best songs from each of these albums, because this is the greatest hits, and what worked in the concerts, what belongs, and then what's going to get cut. I mean, he had to make those decisions.
You know, you mentioned the sort of opposites there, sun versus rain, dawn versus sundown. I hadn't thought of that before. But again, I think that was a calculated choice that he made. And then as that side of the album ends up, you have Cotton Jenny, which is not one that he was particularly well known for. Anne Murray had the sort of definitive version of that song. Then flipping it over to the last of the four sides, you have three songs in a row that were not released as singles, but as I said before, two of them are title tracks to his albums, Don Quixote, Cold on the Shoulder, Old Dan's Records. And then If You Can Read My Mind, you can't get away from that because it's such a ubiquitous part of his legacy. And of course, Carefree Highway. Circle of Steel was an interesting choice, and I love the song. I'm very glad that he included it. I'm not sure if it fits with the flow of the rest of that side. What do you think about that?
Well, I thought the same thing about why Circle of Steel. And then I looked at when he released this album, November. This is released in November of 1975, right before Christmas.
Yeah.
And it's not exactly a Christmas song, but it certainly picks up the season and the vibe, you know. So I don't know if that's it, but it certainly has a mystique about it too. Just it's almost ethereal the way it sounds. But so I don't know. That's a good question. But you're right. I remember at the time that the album came out, I thought, whoa, what is this? Why is this here? Circle of Steel. But it's a great song.
Again, I don't know what he's thinking, but I'm very glad he included it. And that brings us to the end of the musical parts, or the end of the album. This might be a good time for us to add in songs that we wish had made the cut, and we've alluded to a couple of them. And there may have been, again, a calculated decision by the producer saying, well, maybe we should leave this in, maybe we should make it part of a medley, it doesn't fit, blah, blah, blah. But I think Sit Down Young Stranger would have been a good addition to this because it's subtle. It's a subtle observation about war and about the generation gap, and that's why I think it's one of his best. And that was the title track to the record that changed everything for Lightfoot. And I realized they changed the name of the album at one point to reflect the hit single. And then the other one that I would have put in would have been The Last Time I Saw Her, because this to me is the best example of how his vocal range operated. I mean, he's going way up to the top of his vocal range to the point where he almost has to go falsetto. He can't support the notes. And he's coming back down to the very bottom, if not the very bottom, but certainly into something much more moderate and much more something that he can support. You get an impression for how good a singer he was. I was listening to the song a couple of days ago, and I do feel that the strings were a little overdone. It felt a little bit more like the Percy Faith Orchestra at times. But again, the song is a great example of his vocal talents. So those are the two that I would have put on there. To be fair, also, I don't know at what expense. I don't know what I would have taken off to make room for those, but I would have put those two on. What about you?
Well, you and I planned all this, and we discussed a few things leading up to recording this, and we did not talk about what we were going to pick. So I'm going to match you with The Last Time I Saw Her, which has over time has turned into one of my favorites. And I recently got a CD that they captured the recordings at Montreux that were recorded in 76, and that's on there. And so we have an idea 1 year later what that would have sounded like. and it's stunning. It's the best thing on that CD, and he did a lot of those songs so well in that particular concert. And the only thing I've ever seen on that is audio, but anyway, they did capture it on a CD. So any of the Lightfoot fans that haven't acquired that CD yet, I would highly recommend it. It's good. But I love The Last Time I Saw Her, and I believe even Glenn Campbell may have covered that. But it's a really good song, and so you have a great mind. I'm going to be right there with you on that one.
Thanks.
And the other one that I'm going back to my theme of, all right, I'm Lightfoot. Cold on the Shoulder is maybe underrepresented on this greatest hits. What I got to get at least 2 songs from Cold on the Shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
What did he leave out? He left out the ballad that I love, which is Now and Then.
Mm-hmm.
And what better theme than Now and Then? Okay, he's bringing, back the UA recordings and all of that. He could have almost headlined the album Now and Then. So anyway, that and we know the imagery in that song is just so gorgeous. I mean, it's just I don't know. It again. I keep evoking "Song for a Winter's Night," but it's in that range. It's so beautiful. I love the song.
I got to think that there were some discussions about why don't we do a third album for this, and I think they wisely decided we're just going to cut the cord at 2 records because a lot of information already on a double album. And but with the exception of George Harrison's All Things Must Pass, I don't know of too many other triple albums. So I think there was probably some economy or some economical thinking going on here. All right. So we got a couple of things that you should know that we think are important. And one of them was the liner notes. To me, those are a masterpiece. They're the best liner notes that I've ever seen on any record, frankly. You're listening to Carefree Highway Revisited. We'll be right back after a word from a podcast partner or two.
Is that song really a cover? What instrument are they playing there? What do those crazy lyrics mean? If you're the kind of person who thinks about stuff like that, you're in luck because I've got just the podcast for you. How Good It Is chooses a single song each episode and takes a dive into the story behind the song and the artist who made it famous. I'm Claude Call. You can find me in your favorite podcast software or just point your browser to howgooditis.com.
How good it is. Have you checked out the Dylanttantes? It's a podcast full of smart conversations with interesting Dylan scholars, academics, and fans. Find it at fmpods.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
I think they're not only a masterpiece, they are a motivator. It motivated me to go back and to pull every Lightfoot album, and I did this a few days ago. And I wanted to look exactly who contributed on each album, because this thing not only takes you on the career evolution of this great artist, but it brings in to when certain elements and certain talent started to appear on the scene. And maybe it gives you a sense of the difference between the original UA songs and when they were recorded versus what was available to him for the Gold album. So to me, it really also kind of captured Gord as a person and as an artist. All of that is enveloped in how this was written. And I think you did some research, didn't you, on who actually wrote these liner notes?
Right. We were talking about that when you and I were meeting to get ready to do this. And I thought, well, Lightfoot's got to have a really good ghostwriter, or maybe someone at his record label was told, look, just bash something out before we release the record. Lightfoot actually wrote this himself in both the first and the third person. And I really love the changing of perspective between him talking in the first person and them being sort of this narrator on the side. And the other part of it is that I really enjoyed the fact that he begins with his development as a songwriter. He doesn't begin with his birth. This isn't a biography in the sense that he's not saying, I was born in Orillia, Ontario, the switch in perspective keeps you off balance just a little bit and I liked that because that kept my attention. You got 5 or 6 lines of him speaking in the first person and then 5 or 6 lines of the history from somebody who's trying to be objective. And I don't think it was apparent to anybody that Lightfoot actually wrote the whole thing. So I enjoyed that immensely.
Yeah, I was just going to say that only you would come up with that level of detail. I love that. You know, the English professor approach. Okay, you know, that's really good. But not only all of that, but think about the emphasis that it was given within the gatefold album itself. How often do you have an album where literally a page within the gatefold and then as all of this prose is written down, you know, just by itself on the gatefold? I just thought that was so cool. And it's a good read. I mean, you know, it's like a little short story. Read it.
Well, okay. It does come from having been raised by an English professor. So the early training is in their working. I don't know if they gave Grammys for liner notes. If they had, I would have definitely wanted this to win it because it's just written so well. It's a very subtle way of defining who Lightfoot was. Not that anybody who bought the record didn't know who he was already, but reminding them of his musical development, not just his biographical facts, if that makes sense. Yeah, and he didn't really talk about himself as a person. It was all about his music. So we didn't hear about the other things that had happened in his life that were equally important, of course, but probably would not have helped with the musical story. We didn't hear about his marriages. We didn't hear about his love life. We didn't hear about his drinking. We didn't hear about, I got to meet this person or I got this award. It was all about his career as a musician, and that's what it should have been.
Well, think about this. We're sitting in he's in 1975 writing this, and what has happened over the last 11 or 12 years in his life? A lot has happened. And I think that, you know, that you get the sense of that in what's written there. You know, it's not everything. It's not like he's trying to write a full bio, but it was pitch perfect what he wrote. I loved it.
Well, Glenn, we finally did it. We got through both parts of Gord's Gold, and I wanted to thank you for taking the time, and I'm looking forward to having you back on the show again real soon.
That's great, Michael. It's my honor, and you couldn't have picked an album. You know, the 50th anniversary coming up next year, and so good time to do it, but thank you for including me on it. I appreciate it.
And thanks for listening, everybody. If you like this well enough to listen to the whole thing, tell somebody about it. Carefree Highway Revisited is on Apple, Spotify, Acast, or wherever you get your listening matter. I'd like to make a special request for you to visit my Patreon page. I love this show so much, and I want to keep it going, and you're in a position to help. Please head over to www.patreon.com/Carefree Highway Revisited. $1 or $2 a month is all I ask. You can reach me, Mike Messner, at teachermike72@gmail.com. Well, our next episode will have my guest Carol Navarro from Traverse City, Michigan, and she and I will be discussing the Gypsy from the Back Here on Earth album, and that episode will be coming out in mid-December 2024. Until then, for Glenn Nelson, this is Mike Messner reminding you, run for the roses, but don't forget to stop and smell them. We'll see you next time.